Good afternoon and a very warm welcome on what is, in London anyway, a lovely sunny day. And thank you all very much for attending this webinar this afternoon. We have a really exciting discussion, which is going to be a panel discussion today on how social creators are shaping the future of recruitment, brand engagement, and talent diversity. We'll be diving into some digital platforms and having a conversation around Twitch, Minecraft, and other emerging channels, and how they are transforming the way that brands connect with young, diverse talent. Just a bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, there is a Q&A tab. That's not the chat tab. The chat tab is for general conversation, which I will put my email address into in a second so that you'll know the difference. The Q&A tab will be for any questions you have of either David or El Macy from TMP, or indeed your employer panelists who are on the webinar today as well. I will hand over to David shortly. David and El Macy from TMP, and also we have Chris and Hannah from very different employer sectors here today to speak to you as well. And I will be in the background to support for any questions that do come through. It'll be a 30-minute panel conversation, and we encourage you to ask as many questions as possible. So without further ado, we're going to dive straight in, and I'm going to hand over to David. Thanks, David.
Thanks so much, Emma. Hello, everybody. I'm David McFarlane, Head of Employer Brand and Insight at TMP Worldwide. So we're an award-winning employer brand and recruitment marketing agency delivering award-winning digital solutions. I'm delighted to be partnering with ISE to discuss the future of graduate marketing, and we're going to be looking at everything from influencers to Twitch, Minecraft, and many other items that fall within that. We're going to have a really, hopefully, spirited discussion joined by some leading professionals from the early careers space who can show their views on this topic and their experience kind of navigating this landscape, which isn't always straightforward. And they've got some really strong experience in this area and hopefully can clarify some key issues. We're going to be looking at how creators or influencers can connect your brand with diverse talent. So how can you really get in front of those in-demand audiences that are so key to a successful early careers campaign? We're going to be looking at the impact of those new digital channels, as Emma said, and many of which people probably are less familiar with, and Al Macy in particular is going to be able to give us lots of insight there. And we're also going to be looking at the latest trends in media habits for these demographics. So what is it that's going to be key to a strategy of success in the future? So just a quick introduction first from the panelists. So Chris, do you want to introduce yourself first and where you're representing?
Thanks, David. Hi, Chris Webb. I'm Head of Recruitment for the Civil Service Fast Stream. I think many of you have heard of the Fast Stream, but if not, we sent you to recruit for around 1,000 roles a year across government, 17 different professional schemes with huge application volumes, and we're currently number 2 in the Times Top 100.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. And Hannah?
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah Rolfe. I'm Head of Talent Acquisition and Early Careers at Knight Frank. We're a property company, slightly smaller volumes than what Chris has just described. So we recruit about 40 graduates a year, but then we take another kind of 80 or so placement students. But like Chris alluded to, grappling with much higher volumes of applications coming in at the moment.
Thanks, Hannah. And Al Macy, I've teed you up already. This is obviously your absolute sweet spot. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is El Macy, and as David said, I also work at TMP. I am the social and content strategist here. And I've also had the pleasure of working with Chris and Hannah on both of their projects. So thank you.
Thanks, El Macy. Excellent. So Hannah, Chris, you both touched on the fact that you've got kind of different requirements. Maybe it would be useful before we go into things in too much detail to talk specifically about the challenges that you face. So Chris, you know, yours is a really prestigious brand. It's very widely understood. What's the challenge for you from an early careers perspective?
Thanks. I mean, I think we've all got unique challenges as the context and requirements are all different. But actually, when I speak to sort of fellow graduate recruiters, there's also quite a lot of overlap, which is, I guess, why we're all here today. Any decent hiring strategy needs to start with really bottoming out the requirements, though. So unpack and understand them. That's universally good advice. But I'll give you two of my main challenges. The first is complexity. We've currently got 17 different professional graduate schemes under one banner. Candidates can apply for up to 4 scheme preferences, and then we assess them concurrently in merit order. So I want to steer clear of selection strategy. It's not what we're here for today, but in terms of attraction, I need to raise awareness of the scheme as a whole, as well as the individual professions, and I need to dispel some misconceptions. So, for example, who the scheme's for, the range of opportunities, that we're not a general management scheme, and also need to highlight current priority areas. So, for example, we've got locations across the UK, and that we've got some really great opportunities for non-traditional sort of STEM graduates as well. I'm not the only one that's looking there. Secondly, volume. None of us are struggling with low application volumes at the moment. I think the average is about 100 to 150% increase across all employers at the moment, but don't quote me on that. So the challenge is about reaching people who wouldn't normally have heard about the fast stream or considered us or think we could be them. And when I say reach, I mean in a relatable way. So those mainly combined, but potentially in isolation, are my unique challenges.
Brilliant, thanks, Chris. So Hannah, a bit of overlap there with your, you know, really prestigious visible brand, but some differences as well.
A little bit of overlap, yeah, but also some key differences. So I came into the real estate sector 2 years ago. My background, I've run big early careers programs across a number of different sectors. So it's quite interesting coming into this particular sector and some of the kind of reputational challenges that it faces. A lot of people know about a career in the property sector because of a family connection or something along those lines. So it was really about how do we reach from an awareness point of view, not necessarily conversion, I was more focused on awareness, to create those kind of moments of sparking, oh, I could consider that, for a much broader audience. So for me, kind of really tackling that demystification and that awareness piece, because I've seen from some of the data that's out there that compared to other sectors, legal, finance, banking, etc., it's not typically seen as a go-to sector for a young graduate considering a career. So it was really about how do we kind of capture a much broader audience, and within that, probably like Chris, you know, similar challenges around reaching you know, ethnically diverse talent, but also female talent as well, if we kind of add the layers below.
Absolutely. And one of the routes to engaging those audiences, as we've seen recently, has been through social creators or influencers. We're going to talk through some great examples of doing that, how you can navigate some of the pitfalls involved, how you can make a success of it, and most importantly, get some buy-in internally. We know that this is a route that's becoming more and more popular to engage these groups. Almacy, what do brands really need to be aware of then when they're looking to partner with an influencer or a creator, and they're trying to ensure that their brand has visibility with these key groups?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing, of course, do they actually fit your brief? Like, what are you actually looking for? Do their values align with your company's values and the actual audience that you're looking to attract? Obviously, that's key to make sure that they have positive sentiment around the content that they create, because of course you don't want you know, that associated in a negative way with your brand. So of course you have to look out for those things. That's probably the first thing I would say. And an easy way to check that as well is obviously looking through their content, like really observing their content, going through it, and also checking if they've done any past collaborations as well with other brands. That's a really key thing to look out if they could be a successful creator to partner with. I'd also say looking at what kind of influencer they are. So particularly, we find that typically Gen Z actually prefer to kind of consume content from nano influencers or micro influencers. So of course you don't want them to have too much of a massive following where they're not actually cultivating the community that you want to target. you want to make sure that they actually have the audience, the type of people that your demographic that you're trying to target. And if they're not the right creating that space, of course, you don't want to actually waste your time and money investing in social content and them creating content that's not going to really drive traffic or anything like that. And also just looking at where they're active as well, consistency. Some influencers, I think a lot of employer brands will just look at following maybe, and that's actually not one of the key things to look at. Are they being consistent in posting? So actually go to their channels and look at how often they posted. Was it like 3 years ago? Was it actually last week? If they're posting consistently, then you know that they're interacting with the audience that you're also trying to speak to. And again, on that point, engagement rate as well matters. So of course we worked with Knight Frank, and one of our best practices that we kind of look at is asking influencers or creators for 3 to 6 months of their analytics to make sure that their engagement rate is actually high or at a good stage whereby they're actually engaging with the people that you want to speak to. If they're not, and it's just about their following and they've got a massive following, then they might not actually be engaging with them. And of course, you don't want that, again, purely because you don't want to invest and waste time with doing that. So I'd say those are kind of the things that I'd say to look out for.
Absolutely, yeah. So the quality of the following, the level of the engagement, and the audience alignment's absolutely key. Chris, those are things that the civil service fast stream obviously were kind of really ensuring they were going to get right when you started off some of the work that you did partnering with influencers. I mean, your organisation was probably one of the first to really embrace that enthusiastically. How did you go about doing it?
Yeah, there's loads I could talk about here, but I won't dominate it. And I suppose it's helpful if I do give a flavour of what we've done in this space. So we've run a few campaigns now using influencers and micro influencers or nano influencers, and in different settings, so YouTube and in person at universities, shared on social media. So we've experimented, and shamelessly, like you said, we were the first in any sector to embrace this. And given this is an ISE event, it seems appropriate to say we won the award for innovation and attraction for trailblazing here. And that actually makes me really proud, because civil service being recognised as innovators is really good. But we found it really effective and versatile is a word I use quite a lot as well, a way of bringing our brand to life with audiences we're trying to engage with. And at the same time, it helps us to bust some of the misconceptions around the organisation, what we're about. So by engaging with Gen Z and sort of their environments, not ours, virtual, physical, we can contextualise our offering a little bit in a way that's more relatable. Choice of channel, that's important. So you need to select the right environment. For us, YouTube, LinkedIn, but don't ask me about Twitch or Minecraft, and also that's our Macy's area, not mine. I'd also say don't get too caught up with the labels, be it sort of influencers, content generators, social creators. For me, it's about relationship marketing, so keep it simple. Identify the target audience or audiences, research who they identify with and engage with, and then this is just a way of delivering and translating our messages through that voice, and sort of get away from the stereotypes. So I know Logan Paul, etc., because this is business and it's professional. So the creators that we've worked with, they've really taken time to understand the brief and the nuances and balance this with enough freedom of maneuver to have their own style. So I think you can steer them, but try not to control them. It's very positive to work like that. Similarly, what I said about applicant volumes, I'm really confident trying to get a sufficient number of volume of quality candidates every year. And that's due to the strength and visibility of our brand, which means I can afford to take a bit of risk by investing more in a strategy like this to reach niche audiences and investing less in traditional marketing. So I think for everyone on the call, it's having to think about how this will fit within your specific goals and within your wider strategy and prioritization of effort. So if you don't already have a strong brand, you probably need to focus more on building the foundations rather than going all in on something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've seen kind of year on year with the success that you've had with this, that you've been able to shift more of that resource towards this kind of newer frontier, which overall, creates an efficiency around the key demographics you're looking to engage and to kind of dial down some of your stock activity.
That's exactly it. Test it and learn it and iterate it. You don't start all at once. You learn.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, to that end, Hannah, more recent work with yourself has been some of the first tentative efforts in that direction. How did you find taking that first leap into something that was kind of pretty new, albeit hopefully with some clear guidance about what to avoid and what to go for?
I'll be honest, it was probably a little bit nerve-wracking. I remember the day TMPW came to me with my, deck of 10 influencers that I was choosing from. So we had a competition, Design Your Dream House, which was all about that kind of awareness building. And we wanted the influencers to essentially kind of go out and raise awareness within their broader communities that we wouldn't normally be able to reach. So they kind of had a product to sell in a way, which was quite nice. But I remember going through kind of almost like panicking, how am I going to make the right decision as to who is going to, come and represent our brand? But for me, it was a couple of things, as Chris alluded to. I really looked into their audience and their reach, and we went through kind of some of those stats. And there was a couple of people in there I kind of questioned and challenged who then didn't make the shortlist. And then it really came down to kind of, for me, how would they represent our brand, which I think is always a real delicate balancing act, because our Macy said, influencers have got their own style, their tone, rightly so. You don't want to disrupt that because that's the whole how they sell to their own audiences. But for me, it was like, how do I ensure that their delivery will land alongside our broader campaign, and that our brand was really critical. We had originally picked 3 influencers that we were going to work with. Unfortunately, one we then decided not to go forward with, but we had 2 individuals who were also completely different, which was really exciting. So Ebonique, who I think you'll see in an example in a second, very high energy, very playful. And then we had Matt, who was a bit more kind of educational in his content, again, reaching kind of completely different audiences. So for me, I had a drive to make sure we got variety. I really wanted to tap into different communities, which was really important. And then the final thing, look, I've worked for a law firm before, so I did extreme due diligence into their kind of backgrounds, their repertoire. There was quite a few political issues going on at the point we were choosing some of these influencers. So again, were they commenting on any of these? Was this going to cause any kind of backlash, etc.? We were really tight around that, and obviously really tight around our contract negotiations ultimately as well. So kind of all of those factors came into the decision ecosystem as to who we decided to partner with.
That's a great point. I mean, you kind of can protect yourselves through that kind of thing. And it's interesting, isn't it, that we think of influencers and we might not imagine that they're so well versed in kind of engaging in that kind of arrangement. But of course, they're looking to protect their authenticity with their audience as well, just as you are with your own brand, the brand that you're overseeing. So they're kind of very familiar, aren't they, with knowing that there will be topics that they'll be invited to kind of engage with. There'll be some that might not be so appropriate. And that's a familiar move when you're trying to engage an influencer anyway.
I think yes and no. So it was interesting. A couple of the conversations we had to have with some of the influencers, one had worked with corporates before, one hadn't. And the individual who hadn't, obviously having to go through some of those contract negotiations and make sure that they were comfortable. It was obviously a two-way process to educate them in that as well, which, yeah, to your point, maybe slightly surprised me, but it was part of the learning journey for them, and kind of understanding what it means to then kind of go and do the broader, bigger corporate partnerships.
Absolutely. And just thinking about the kind of the worst case scenario, something you want to absolutely avoid, Macy, what's a big red flag if a corporate brand in particular is thinking of partnering with an influencer? If they're poorly guided and advised, what should they really watch out for?
Yeah, I mean, Hannah actually touched on that perfectly. So they obviously, each creator brings their own tone of voice, their own kind of messaging to their own brand. And of course, if you're collaborating with them, there has to be that balance of your values and how you're portrayed needs to be balanced and kind of aligned. Because of course, you don't want overly negative or political or inappropriate kind of content being portrayed with your brand. So I'd say that's the main thing, but also something that Chris touched on, I think briefly, was that again, these creators, they all bring personality to the content that they're creating. And I think looking out for authenticity as well. So making sure that the content that they're creating is not too scripted, not too ad heavy, and they're actually speaking the language to the right audience. Because if you find a creator who obviously speaks in a tone that's like, come and work for Knight Frank, you don't really want that. You want something that feels real, feels authentic, and actually speaks to the an early careers audience, because they can know straight away if you're kind of trying to sell them something. So I'd say those are maybe the two key things I'd look out for as well.
Great. So we're going to move on now to talk a little bit about some of the channels that exist around this space and what the way in which you can deliver some of the messaging that you're looking to do when you're aligning your brand in this way. So we kind of forecast the conversation around Twitch, Minecraft, and others. So lots of the work that we've done recently exists in some of these spaces, which lots of people will be probably a bit less familiar with. And certainly your key stakeholders are probably not, regularly congregating around these channels because, they are not the early careers audience. So Almasi, you're familiar with this sort of stuff. Can you give us a quick 101 on Twitch in particular? What is it, and what are the kind of core mechanics of how you actually use it as a channel?
Yeah, of course. So Twitch is basically a live streamer platform. It's predominantly known for gaming. So a lot of gamers, they can play different video games. So that ranges from Roblox, Minecraft, Sims, and Fortnite. There's a whole heap of different games that you can play on there. But essentially, that's like the main thing that people know Twitch for. But it also includes music. You can do live Q&As, live talk shows. A lot of people do travel content, or they'll just do kind of real time, making kind of like if they're in the kitchen or something like that. It's kind of just having that interactive community feel. That's what Twitch is kind of about. And viewers actually spend quite a lot of hours on streams. It can range from like 1 to 3 hours. I think the one that we did with Ebonix was about an hour and a half maybe. So people are really engaged and they like to interact and kind of like, have the live chats and be able to speak to the actual person that's streaming. So yeah, that's kind of a 101 on Twitch. Minecraft, many of you guys probably know what this one is essentially a game, an immersive game where you have 3D worlds. It's very interactive. You can build on there. So a lot of brands have actually built virtual campuses. They've done like recruitment games, digital experiences. So it's a gamified storytelling. It's a way to kind of like create different environments and build this interactive play area. Basically, that's essentially what Minecraft and Twitch is, and they interact in terms of you can play Minecraft while streaming. That's how they kind of play hand in hand.
Got it. Thank you. So, Hannah, were you a familiar Twitch user yourself before we got to this point?
No, I'm afraid not. No, I hadn't actually heard of Twitch until TMPW decided to educate me.
So, Almasi, why don't you sort of bring this to life a bit? We've got a short video that shows some of what that experience is actually like, and then we can talk through a little bit about what we did with the Nightfront brand in this space.
Yeah, of course. So, of course, we obviously partnered with the influencers on the Nightfront campaign, and this is Ebonix, who we partnered with. She is in particular a Sims creator. And she essentially set up this live stream. Like I mentioned, it was like a 1 hour live stream where she could interact with the audience, kind of make decisions together, like how to actually what the dream house would look like. So looking at inspiration, actually doing the building within the built environment, this interactive gameplay. And again, you have the live chat where people can kind of say, okay, maybe you should move this over here. Maybe you should have this kind of element in your dream house. So it's quite interactive, and she has such a bubbly personality. So it made it really engaging. And yeah, this was kind of like the outcome. And essentially that kind of led to driving awareness and engagement, and essentially entries for the competition as well. And I don't know, Hannah, if you had anything that you wanted to add to this as well in terms of the outcome. I know you were super thrilled with the entries that we had as well. We had 3 winners. So yeah, it was great.
It was just a really exciting way to bring it all to life. And I think it was quite fitting just with the property sector. It's had all these influencers with online shows of Selling Sunset, Selling London, your Daniel Daggers, your Ari Reid. So it was just a great opportunity to kind of utilize influencers to try and tap into the space a little bit. And some of the competition entries, the amount of effort that was put into them and the level of detail just kind of really blew me away. Some really, really incredible entries, and also just some content that we can continue to kind of use and talk about, and hopefully kind of expand this into next year's campaign, which is really exciting.
So there's kind of a new conversation there that's, you know, existing around this sort of fun, playful thing that's still very kind of brand aligned for the built environment for Knight Frank, and it kind of aligns with those things neatly, but presenting it to that audience in a way that's really, really palatable and interesting to them.
Exactly. It naturally brings it to life, right? Compared to just someone kind of, you know, typically standing there and talking to them about it. Just all these different kind of ideas and concepts, which is such a nice way to do it.
So the stream brought that to life and kind of engaged that group. And then we have the competition element around it as well, which added obviously a competitive component to it and allowed us to kind of see how much energy that went into it. And like you say, Hannah, some of the submissions were incredible.
Yeah, they really were. The level of detail that went to some of those submissions was powerful, but there was a cash prize, so it was worth it.
Absolutely. So this is obviously something that, Hannah, you said was new to you, probably was new to most people within your organization who hadn't typically been thinking about the ways in which you could open up new channels. I mean, Chris, you have pioneered within your own space the ability to try and get people on board where they're not necessarily already sort of primed to understand something that's not necessarily for them. How do you think you best go about doing that when you've got this thing that you think is going to work, but possibly the key stakeholders are less aligned to?
Yeah, I mean, I know you said a lot of you, but it's a collaboration, not just me. And I've got to say, I haven't seen that. That was really cool, Hannah, and that's actually why I like this approach, because it's so versatile. I'm also really glad you didn't ask me about Twitch or Minecraft. In terms of getting people to embrace the new thinking, though, I mean, sorry, this might sound like common sense, but a lot of this stuff is basic, I think, which is that I say bring your stakeholders on the journey. Don't just consider this in isolation. Involve them in discussing and refining the goals, the requirements, right from the beginning, and the mission that you've got here, and then sort of socialize your wider strategy. So it's not just this new thinking, it's all of it and why you think it's going to work, how it's going to work. Have your data and evidence to hand, all the stuff that Macy's just mentioned as well, and explain it as planned marketing rather than gimmick, which is what people might think if they just see it on its own. And then all these new thinking elements will just be in context and relevant. I've got to say this because I always say it as well, and it's as much to remind myself as well as others, and you touched on it, David, but it's really important, really obvious, and even if you remember nothing else that I've said, it's just to remember that sort of you and I are not the target audience, and neither are our senior stakeholders. So it's really not about whether it resonates with me personally.
Well, we always hope that we can. Sorry, go on, Hannah.
I'd echo that, Chris, because I think when I first had my, 10 influencers that I was looking through, I really had to stop myself being like, I don't get it, and have to really put myself and go, okay, how is this going to relate to kind of the audience and what they're trying to get out of it? So completely agree with that point.
Yeah, and it's really easy to forget it. And even now, that's why I keep on saying it, because I watch that and go, I don't like that. And it's like, it's not for you. So, okay, then I'll sit down again.
And as much as possible, we can present data that shows the uptake with these things. We can illustrate the conversion. We can talk about how, you will engage with these things and how normal it might be for certain groups. But at the end of the day, there's a little bit of a leap of faith. And obviously, the first time that's taken, it feels riskier than it then becomes. Hannah, what are your thoughts in the future? I mean, is it all going to be on Twitch and Minecraft for you guys now, or is it be a blend of different activity across multiple channels?
No, I think it's a blend, right? I think early careers is in a really interesting space at the moment because we've gone through kind of the ricochet from traditional on campus to a majority being online. People are having challenges around kind of budgets, etc. as we move into this year. I think it's a blend. I think you've got your traditional channels to land those core recruitment messages, and then you've got your playful channels where you can think about different ways that you can engage with different communities and broader audiences to kind of bring the brand to life for people who may have not considered your sector previously, which I think is really important. So no, for me, it's about how does the ecosystem come together. I still think it's really important to have those in-person moments as well for people to come and connect. It shouldn't purely be online. So as humans, how do we kind of create that blend of experience for an individual who's going to engage with your brand?
Absolutely. So just moving on towards our final section now, we're going to be touching on the latest trends in media habits and consumption for early careers audiences, and obviously, therefore, some of the channels that we all need to be aware of, the next Twitch or whatever it might be, before we then go on to the Q&A. So please do submit your questions for the panel that can provide their thoughtful answers. So, Almasi, what are we not hearing about now that's going to become, possibly more mainstream in the future? What are the key things, the key channels that are going to emerge, do you anticipate, in the next year or so?
So I wouldn't necessarily say that employees haven't heard about TikTok, but what I will say is that I think a lot of employees are still a little bit nervous, a little bit scared of using TikTok for early careers content. But actually, there's a behavioral shift in Gen Z actually using TikTok, not just to consume entertaining content, but actually to search, to learn, and to make decisions around their career paths, what kind of jobs are out there and opportunities. And actually, one of the stats that I found was that actually 51% of Gen Z actually prefer TikTok to Google search. So that means that they're shifting towards looking for their jobs and careers in the future. This is essentially where the future of marketing is going to be, is on channels that kind of show short form content, digestible, that is essentially an entry point for early career audiences to have that information. So I think if employees aren't on there, then it is quite a bit of a problem for them, because it is going to continue to grow and grow. And that's where they're going to be finding a lot of their information about what jobs are available at different companies, and being able to like stack them up against the competition. And that's, of course, one of the ways, if you've got your industry, right, and you're trying to make sure that the best early careers talent kind of come to your organization, you're fighting against a lot of competitors who maybe are probably already on TikTok and already on these other platforms as well. And so you obviously want to make sure that you're on TikTok. And
really, optimizing your content there as well, because now that we know that the behavioral habit is around using it as you might previously done with a search engine, it's not just having stuff that advocates for what you're doing, it's things that answer those questions directly and give you clear, interesting content that's aligned to that.
exactly. And so you have to make sure that the content is bite-sized, it's searchable, and is visually led as well. So day in the life, of course, we know that one, but like actually giving them insightful tips, like behind the scenes insider like information. So CV tips, FAQs about their career paths, but also thinking about, from an early careers perspective, someone who's a graduate who might be a little bit nervous or might not know, what opportunities are out there, or just kind of feel like they're not going to meet the requirements for a role. How do you tap into what they're feeling in that moment, and have content that actually serves that purpose and helps them to get through that? I think that's kind of the key point, that you want to make sure that the content that you're going to create actually serves them a purpose. And also just using relevant hashtags as well. So making sure that when you're putting content out there, it's searchable. So careers content, so hashtag careers or hashtag grad life, so that they can go and search it and actually find you straight away. And also just encouraging, if you have any employee creators who are creating content in the early career space, actually get them to upload on TikTok. I think you're missing out on opportunity by not using the people that you already have. Of course, we spoke about social creators, but actually having advocates for your brand is really, really important as well. Making sure that your employer brand is built up before you look for, outside people to kind of come in and help like build your campaign, actually start building from within. So that's, I would say, one of the things that, one of the channels rather that employer brands need to look out for. But also there is a new one that's emerging called Ploy. Not sure if anyone's heard of that one. I think, yes, Hannah and Chris, you're nodding your head, so you probably heard. So this is a new platform. It's kind of like TikTok and LinkedIn together. So it's a professional kind of social platform where again, it's video led, because that's what's kind of driving a lot of just momentum in terms of early career audiences being able to digest content. Is visual led, and essentially students can kind of upload their portfolios, so employees can actually look at what work they've done. It's just a unique way to showcase their CVs without actually having to write out things. They're actually it's just a different way to be able to showcase yourself to prospective employers, and also to find candidates as well. So Chloe is definitely one that I would say look out for as well. So yeah.
Brilliant.
Just to
Thank
add
you.
to this, I think from my perspective, you've kind of got your awareness bucket, which is your kind of slightly fun, engaging channels, which you just talked about, Macy, with your Twitch, your Instagram, your TikTok, you deploy. And then you've got that conversion piece. And I think one of the biggest areas of growing talent on LinkedIn is the graduate population. So being able to kind of serve that different content from that awareness to that real conversion piece, and really kind of thinking about, I think, your LinkedIn channel as well, I think is going to be really powerful over the next couple of years.
Definitely.
Totally, yeah, and I mean, with that, it's just as well as the channels and the kind of habits, the right content that your brand can align with and still resonate appropriately with is going to be effective on those channels, which is absolutely key. Excellent. Okay, well, so we move on to the final part of the Q&A. We've had quite a few questions that have come through that relate to specific bits and pieces. Any questions to do with stats, conversions, etc., we have to follow up with after the session and share from the detail of campaigns that we've run. But some of the more specific questions about how things have been sort of overcome, I guess, with some of the challenges that are typical towards launching any new campaign, particularly a digital one. We've had a question that explores how you can ensure that you're kind of combining the right level of fun with the important outcome that you're looking to drive. So, Chris, maybe your thoughts first on this. You're looking to make sure that you're conveying the right message, but doing so with personality. What's key to making sure that that's going to be an effective trade-off?
I think we've covered that to an extent already, and Macy covered it really well. It's what I mentioned, which is just being aware this is a sort of professional marketing tool. So you can steer but not control. And I think that will strike the balance, is you kind of say, you know, what the parameters are, what you want to do, what's acceptable, what's not, select the right people to work with, but then let them have their own style and do it naturally, rather than them having to have a placard of your organisation next to them. And I think that'll naturally achieve it if you get the right people to work with.
And doing that in the right kind of way can avoid things feeling like a sponsored live stream, right? And you know, the concern, as one of the questions raises, is that your kind of your brand and the brand of the influencer, obviously they might fit well, but they still want to give their audience an authentic experience looking at whatever it is that they're engaging on. Hannah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that was one of the challenges we had, right? So I really held a high bar in terms of the content that was going to go out. And if I wasn't happy with it, it was absolutely not going out. Even if we'd kind of run to the end of our budgets and we hadn't got where we'd got to, I was going to protect the brand to kind of the nth degree. And we had a bit of a case with one of our influencers who'd designed a piece of content. And he'd gone so far away from his personal style because he tried to go so corporate. And I watched it and thought, no, the original draft was like a used car salesman. I thought, absolutely not, like that can't go out. So, you know, we worked with him and kind of said, no, we want your personality to come through in this. The whole point of us partnering with you is to have that authentic brand that you represent. And so I think, you know, keeping the content true to itself is really important for it to land successfully and kind of come out the other side. And also, look, when it's an experiment, you have to have some flex in the system. So we had a bit of trouble, like I said, back and forth with contracts, which delayed some stuff going out for us. So we just had to build in some extra flex, extended. You know, there wasn't kind of a life or death moment. We had to close a certain thing at a certain date. So just having that flex in the system and being able to adapt a little bit, I think when you're experimenting for the first time is really important.
Absolutely. I mean, in general, this is something that we're seeing more of across the early careers space, but it's still not necessarily a central part of lots of campaigns. Chris and Hannah, both of you really, do you sense that there's an increased kind of familiarity and awareness in the early career space for new approaches. I mean, it's always been a nice environment for slightly more kind of out there campaigns and that kind of thing.
It's always been a sector which is everyone wants to compete with everyone else, right? That's what it's all about: airtime, market time, getting your brand out there in front of the generations coming through. And as such, I think that naturally lends itself to people wanting to experiment with different kind of marketing mediums and impact, etc. I don't see this replacing, some of the more traditional channels where people go for that core information, which are really well established. But I think it's got a really nice way of just adding those additional elements and reach and components to your campaign.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Chris, any thoughts to add on that?
Yeah, it's slightly different spin on it as well, but I think on the whole, we're fairly dynamic and forward thinking in early careers, and some of the challenges more around the wider stakeholders we've discussed as well. So where HR is quite integrated as a core business function, which is really good. We just need to keep the stakeholders informed what we're doing and why. So we're going to need to keep an appetite for this kind of approach, like Hannah said as well, within context of everything else we're doing, not on its own. And one is for competitive advantage, because this is an effective way of reaching target audiences. It's good for that. And secondly, if this trend for high application volumes is going to continue for whatever reason, I'm not talking about AI today, we'll be here for another hour, but again, this will help us to be more targeted as well. So it's as I said, really versatile.
Absolutely. I suppose a lot of people might be thinking, I love this idea, but I can foresee so many problems or blockers that might exist. Hannah, we've talked through a few of the key things that are really important: qualifying the right organisation to partner with, making sure that the influencers are kind of well briefed and aligned, but still authentic. You can do all of those things right and still probably have a few issues. What do you think is really critical to trying to ensure that a project like this can be navigated smoothly within your own organisation?
I think it's all the key components, right, in terms of that socialization from the start. So who are the core individuals who will want to have a voice on this? So for me, it was our social media team, it was our marketing team, and it was our legal team, to really make sure that they understood what we were doing, why we were doing it, what were the kind of guardrails in place, and just get everyone kind of comfortable. And then just those regular check-in conversations, just in terms of, this is where we're up to, this is where we're going, just a final sense check, this is what we're thinking of doing. And that just allowed the project to run smoothly in a very collaborative manner.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Chris, anything to add that you think is kind of really important about making sure that these things kind of navigate smoothly?
I mean, I agree with things Hannah's just said about the sort of the socialization and the stakeholders. So rather than repeat that, I mean, maybe a sort of aligned with that, it's just reframing to ourselves that the blockers aren't always stoppers, and it's about navigation. So they can be a good thing, because it means that the strategy is quite sort of agile and keeping up with current considerations. And I'd probably be quite worried if everything was going exactly to plan, I'll be missing something. So I think, as well as that wider stakeholder bit, it's good project management really, is the risk management side and horizon scanning, because you should be able to see many of these coming and plan accordingly. And they're fairly universal, like budget, changing priorities, changing leadership. You just need to stay alive to the context.
Mm-hmm.
I also think, just to add to that, probably you have to keep scanning what is going on out in the kind of social media world, and as such, just make sure you've got your eye on the pulse as to when you might be. So, for example, we had at one point all of the awful wildfires had happened in LA around the time that obviously kind of Design Your Dream Home was going off, and so just being kind of mindful of certain things, and when we were pressing go on certain buttons, we just felt was the right thing to do from a brand perspective.
Absolutely. Macy, we've had just a final question here about Blue Sky.
Right, so that question I think was in relation to ploy. So it's spelled PLOY. Yeah, and there was another question as well, asking about how was the competition promoted prior. And there was a point made about just making sure that, social creators don't just kind of like take the lead, and it feels kind of forced. What we did before is, of course, we had other channels that we pushed a competition on through Knight Frank's channel. So actually talking about Knight Frank as a company, as a brand, as a whole, so that the early careers audience could actually understand who they are, and what the benefits of working with Knight Frank could be, so that when they're looking at the creators' content, they're actually pushed to look at Knight Frank's content that we're pushing out in conjunction with that. So it's all synced up and it's balanced. It doesn't feel like too promoted, but it feels like the brand actually has a genuine interest in making sure that you know about the opportunities that are available.
That was really important for me when we were designing it, was to make sure that we had some kind of educational content woven in alongside the more kind of fancy showstopper, win a prize. It was to kind of pull it back into that educational piece, which the team did an amazing job of weaving in that content.
Thank you. Just before we come to complete close, we've had lots of questions, as I mentioned, several of which we've gone through in detail, and some of which we've kind of pre-answered in different ways. Some questions in particular about stats. We'd be very happy to kind of go through things in a bit more detail, share some information around the case studies and the conversions that have been involved. And so, yeah, very keen to follow up with anybody after this to showcase how that's had real impact and to illustrate what TMP Worldwide can support with.
Great, thank you. Thanks, David. As you said, we'll connect you guys with the questions that have come up around stats. I hope everything else was covered. I believe it was. And interestingly, Macy, that you mentioned Ploy, they're actually a member of ours as well. So well aware of Ploy and the really interesting things that they're doing. If there is anything that that has come up today that you think about later, potentially because it has been so interesting in fact finding, and you want to ask either our TMPW or indeed our employers who have worked with TMP, please do reach out and let us know. We'd be happy to connect you with them, or if you want to have a conversation, Dave, I'm going to send some of that information over to you and your team as well. Thank you so much for that. I've made so many notes just from my own perspective. It's really, really interesting. And yes, thank you all for coming today. I can see the participants there as well. I appreciate your time. And if there is anything that we can help with and support with within the ISE, do let me know. But in terms of wrapping up, I think we're good to go.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for your time today. Thank you. We've got lots of thank yous coming in. Brilliant. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.